Hi everybody, my name's Horatius the Dwarf. I've been playing a lot of Dark and Darker. I'm a VTuber, as you can tell. Forgive me for that if you can. But I'm seeing a lot of people give class guides, and I don't see a lot of Cleric mains out there. So I am a Cleric main, as you can tell. Played until level 20. Love Cleric. I think it's a really good class. I think it's underutilized, and even though I have some fair amount of time in the game already, I'm still learning stuff every single day about this class. So I'm gonna try and give an exhaustive, looking at you, how long this video is, exhaustive impression on how to build your cleric, how to progress as a cleric, and everything that you need to know before you begin your crusade in the dark and the darker. I'll go ahead and turn the model off so you guys ain't gonna stare at that shit anymore, but we'll see you on the other side. So, first things first. I'm gonna be using some terms that I'll get into in a little while, but first, let's start about the basics of Dark and Darker, right? There used to be a little button down here called for Fop Doodles Only, which would give you the basics, but I'm going to run through it pretty quick. So, we'll go over to the class, to our perk and skill section, real quick. What do all these numbers mean? Gosh, it's a bunch of numbers. I'll give you the base. Strength is always valuable to a cleric. It increases your HP and your physical power. Agility is something that is very useful to everybody in this game. Move speed is king. It also affects your attack speed, and clerics have very slow attack speed. Will is our spell power. This is only going to be 50% of the time relevant to you as a cleric, or probably 75% of the time. The point is, Will's very powerful to you. It increases how long your buffs last, and increases your magic resistance as well. So clerics naturally have a very high will stat. Knowledge is how many spells you can carry at a time. We'll get into that as it comes, but this also, and this is something I'm not seeing a lot of people give notice to, it impacts how fast you cast, which is really important, especially in tight moments. But also, it increases your item identification speed, which is not a mechanic in the game yet, but I imagine when it comes around, it'll be very useful. Resourcefulness is the cleric's worst stat, and you will feel it in everything that you do. Resourcefulness is your interaction speed. It also impacts, like, installing traps or campfires. It's the really, really important stat that clerics always are going to struggle with. We have the lowest resourcefulness stat in the game, so if you find any single item that has bonus resourcefulness on it, it's going to be especially impactful for a cleric to find it. So, 3 big stats for us, okay? As clerics, you're going to want will and strength and resourcefulness to counterbalance our deplorable interaction speed. We have pretty decent health at 92, we have decent spell memory at 12, and the rest of this, you really should just take like the 5 to 10 minutes to read every single one of these. There are plenty of videos out there on YouTube right now that are breaking down the math for all of these. I am not a statistician, I am not a mathematician. There are other places for it. So, let's walk through it. Every class in this game has 2 active slots, these squares on the bottom, and 4 passive slots. You only start with 1, and you gain each additional perk slot every 5 levels to a cap of 15 for 4 slots. So, all of these are good, none of these are bad. The ones that are bad are niche. Advanced Healer is probably the most simple, but directly most powerful perk that the cleric ever gets access to. It gives you +5 to every single instance of healing that you put on somebody. We'll talk about each of these more in a situational sense later, but for now we're just going to get through the basics. Blunt Weapon Mastery gives you 10% more attack power when attacking with a blunt weapon, and the only weapons that a cleric can use are the Flanged Mace, the Morning Star, and the Quarterstaff, I'm fairly certain. All 3 of those are blunt, so pretty much, unless you're using your fist, which is also a blunt weapon. So in every instance, Blunt Weapon Mastery is just 10% attack power for every single cleric that uses it. Brewmaster, very interesting perk. It's going to require some explaining, but simple to say, if you drink ale in this game, I'll show you over here at the Tavern Master, even the lowest rarity of ale gets you drunk for 15 seconds, gives you 7 strength. Now going back to us, that's going to almost double, increase by 50% at least, our strength stat. That gives us max HP and physical power. So ales are essentially strength potions if you have Brewmaster and you're not exhibiting or not experiencing the detrimental effects of drinking alcohol, which is drunkenness. So your movement and your sight can sway, can make it more difficult to hit shots. But basically with Brewmaster, your ales, which are only gold apiece, and at the lowest quality, give you massive strength bonuses for a short duration. Holy Aura gives you and everyone nearby 15 armor and magic resistance. Now, looking over here to our armor rating. In our base kit, we only have 23 armor rating. Very, very low. So it's only giving us 0.5% of damage reduction. So you can see how Holy Aura can give a few percent of additional reduction, not to just physical, but to also magical. You won't see these stat changes on this screen. But Holy Aura, pretty solid utility. Kindness, you heal yourself for 15% of everything that you heal other people. Perseverance reduces all incoming damage by 3. I've seen other people talk about this, and it's very relevant. This is every single instance of damage is reduced by 3. So this is particularly effective against small hits and DOTs, or damages over time. So poisons, bleeds, anything that's small is massively reduced when it's reduced by 3. Bigger hits, so if a barbarian turns a corner and takes your head off for 80 damage with a battle axe to the head, this perseverance is not going to help you a whole lot there, but for smaller damages of more common, it's very useful. You are always going to get value out of perseverance. It's one of his most powerful perks, in my opinion, as a cleric. Protection from evil is niche, but very useful when it's relevant. Half duration on all harmful effects. This one actually will take effect the moment you equip it. Let's see. Right? Whatever. I'm not going to go looking for it. Doesn't matter. Point is, every negative effect that goes onto you only lasts for half as long. So poisons deal half damage. All DOTs, half damage. Any debuffs, half duration. Very, very useful most of the time. I'll skip Requiem and come to it last because it's kind of complicated. Undead Slaying is essentially if you wanted even more damage from Blunt Weapon Mastery, but only when you attack undead. So it's 20%. That's one of the largest percent damage upgrades in the game, but it's for PvE only, and only some PvE. Now, about half, or maybe even the majority of the PvE targets in this game are undead, so Undead Slaying is very relevant, and we'll talk about some builds that use it. But in PvP scenarios, which you are frequently going to find yourself in as a cleric, it is completely useless and a wasted perk slot. So you need to make sure that you build around having Undead Slaying. Requiem. So we, as clerics, are the only class that can resurrect other players without the usage of a resurrection shrine. So when we take Requiem, not only do we revive, in either of those instances, whether we use the spell Resurrection or the altar, we do not give up any of our own life, which you don't with the spell anyway, but also the person revives with 50% of their health instead of, like, I think it's like 5%, or maybe even literally a single hit point. Like, when you revive someone, they're back in the game, but barely. Whereas Requiem brings them back half, which can save you a lot in terms of healing over the course of a run. If you pick someone up even once, Requiem has paid for itself. Alright, let's go to skills. Spell memory is spell memory. We'll talk about that a lot because this is how you can cast spells. There are very few builds in my mind that do not use spell memory, but we'll get to that. Divine Protection gives you a very short but very powerful physical damage buff, resistance buff. 30% less damage for 4 seconds is a very short amount of time, but if you time it appropriately, it can absolutely win you fights in PvP. Holy Purification is basically a Holy Nova. You shoot out a massive AoE that deals 100 damage to all undead. But you have to stand still. It's quite the cast. It's rough, but it's very, very good. Then we have Judgment, which is a targeted, kind of finicky to use because of that, quick prayer that deals 25 magic damage and reduces the movement speed of the target by 20% for 2 seconds. Again, this doesn't feel like a lot, but as I mentioned before with agility, move speed in this game is completely king. So being able to nerf someone's move speed by 20%, even for just 2 seconds, can allow someone else in your party to catch them or prevent them from getting to a door or a doorway sooner than they would have otherwise liked to. So Judgment can really throw some PvP encounters in your favor when used appropriately. Also, let's just be honest with you guys. Clerics, we're really hurting for ranged options. We really don't have a lot. So Judgment is one of our few ranged options, and it doesn't cost a spell slot, which makes it unique. Smite. deal additional 10 magic damage to all enemies that you hit within 7 seconds. Smite is super, super good. It's very, very easy to use. You use it, and then for 7 seconds, every time you hit somebody, you deal 10 more damage, and it's all magical damage. This makes our fists devastating. It makes our mace headshots devastating. It makes our quarterstaffs ridiculously powerful. Smite can take what would in some instances be perceived as a kind of not that threatening in melee fighter, and suddenly they're incredibly high damage potential out of nowhere. Now that we've done that, let's get into the spells, because golly gee willikers, do we clerics have a ton of spells. I think we may have the most spells in the game. If not, it's real close. I'll go from the most expensive down to the cheapest. These are similarly going to be in a way that I mentioned the perks. They're going to be quite niche, and as we get to the lower tiers, they're probably going to be a lot more general usage. Starting off with Resurrection. It costs 8 memory or 8 spell capacity to memorize this spell. All spells cost 1 slot per tier level, so it is basically impossible at base kit it is impossible to have 2 of your more powerful spells. So we'll work with spell lists in time. So Resurrection. Resurrection is exactly what it says on the tin. The corpse has to have their soul heart in it, but you can cast Resurrection on a corpse, and up they get after a pretty lengthy spell cast, to be entirely honest. This is one of those instances why knowledge is really useful. Resurrection at base, I don't know, is like 10, 15 seconds to cast. It's huge. It's a big, long cast time. But being able to pick someone up after a fight that like if you get into a team fight, and someone dies in the fight, that can kneecap your experience for the rest of the run. But being able to pick someone up, not only for them to, leave themselves, but also carry their own shit out, is huge. Resurrection, very powerful, very niche usage. Obviously, it's worthless if you're by yourself. Locust Swarm and Earthquake are 2 very interesting spells. Locust Swarm, concentrate for a certain period of time to summon a swarm of locusts in an area, dealing 2 damage per 10th of a second to targets within the area. Locust Swarm is crazy area control. Both of these tier 7 spells focus on area control, but Locust Swarm can do devastating damage. If you stand in Locust Swarm for a full second, that's 20 magic damage. That's incredible. That's a huge amount of damage just to stand in it. So you can use this to block doorways. You can use this to lock people into a fight by taking their exits away from them. It's very, very useful. You only get 2 casts of it. Resurrection, you only get 1. That's what little bottom right numbers mean. Locust Swarm, you get 2 casts, but they are very, very powerful if used correctly. This is not a very good PvE spell. It is a very good PvP spell. Earthquake. Concentrate for a fixed period of time to create an earthquake in a specific area, dealing 10 damage per step, and reducing movement speed by 50% when a target moves in it. So Earthquake, you lock an area, basically, and if someone steps through it, they take damage per step. Similar to the Barbarian's ability to Achilles Strike, which makes you take damage for every step you take while you're under that debuff, this will shred people who run through that area. Absolutely quickly. Like, a full health fighter can run through an earthquake and die in the process if they're not careful. Now, Earthquake is circumstantial. This, I would argue, is more PvE powerful than Locust Swarm, because enemies will always try and walk towards you unless they're ranged. So you can set up Earthquake to absolutely AoE an entire group of NPCs very effectively if you're careful. But still, very, very high cost spell, high reward. Sanctuary, the first of the healing spells we'll be talking about, and arguably the most powerful. Sanctuary channels for 5 seconds, healing all allies in an area for 5 per second, and dealing a bunch more spell damage to undead. So Sanctuary has the ability to be offensive like Earthquake does, but it doesn't do as much damage because the duration is shorter. But then also Sanctuary can heal. Now, Sanctuary has a lot of fun things that you can do with it. Sanctuary benefits basically by doubling its health, the healing that it gives, with Advanced Healer, and Kindness makes Sanctuary the most powerful self-heal in the game, because when you use Sanctuary, and if you have allies in there, and you have Kindness and Advanced Healer, running. So your Sanctuary is now healing for 10, and every time it ticks, hitting one of your allies for 10, you get 1.5 extra healing on yourself. So if you and your 2 boys are in a group of 3, and you cast Sanctuary and you're healing everybody in it, or your whole team with it, you're getting an extra 3 health per tick. So Sanctuary can get out of hand in terms of how much healing it can provide very, very quickly. Very versatile spell. Undeniably my favorite spell that's above tier 3 in terms of cost. My single favorite spell that's like one of the bigger spells of that we get. Holy Light, very, very straightforward, very versatile spell. Heals for 30, our biggest single heal, and does 100 damage to undeads. So, Holy Light, big heals, big damage to undeads. Important to note, it will heal living targets. Not just your friends, but your enemies too. If you shoot a goblin with Holy Light, you're going to heal it for 30. So you need to be careful when you're using Holy Light. Aiming is key when you use Holy Light. Divine Strike is our AoE little nuke. After you fully charge Holy Strike, it'll put up a circle on the ground. When you release, it will, after a brief delay, deal 15 damage and blind for 2 seconds. The 15 damage obviously is not over 2 seconds. It does the 15 immediately, then blinds for 2 seconds. Very powerful. You get 4 casts of it, which is very nice. It's only tier 4, so it's quite reasonable to refill this during a run. And then you can use this. This is other than Judgment. It is our only on-demand range damage. These 2, Locust, Swarm, and Earthquake, require a lot of setup and have to be channeled for a while. But Divine, Holy Strike, and Judgment are our only ranged damage on demand. Very, very useful for that reason. A unique and powerful feature. More of a PvP spell than a PvE spell. Bind. For less than 1 second, you hold a person in place. Similar to Judgment's move speed penalty, this can absolutely shape how chases and how running away can work. If someone is chasing you and you whip around and hit them with a bind, and then press X to stow your weapon so you get full move speed and run away, you can make a lot of distance for that in that 1 second of time. So bind can really save you when you're in a bind, but it can also halt people that are charging forward. This is really, really useful when you need to hold someone still for another person's spell to hit them, or to prevent them from turning a corner for just that extra second. Bind is one of those very, very powerful effects, but you must be incredibly accurate with it. It is very easy to just throw out a bunch of binds and do nothing with it for a whole run. So, high skill ceiling on this spell, very, very high skill floor. Or very, very low skill floor. Does very little if you're not careful with it, is my point. Divine Strike is basically the spell version of Smite. It is not as powerful, but it lasts much longer. It is our first of our direct buff spells. It gives us 5 extra weapon damage. This is physical damage, to be clear, not magical damage, unlike Smite. For 20 seconds, basically, whoever you cast this on deals 5 more weapon damage every time they strike. This can be a lot of extra damage depending upon who you're casting it on. Casting it on a rogue is very powerful because every single time they stab, which is a lot, they get 5 extra damage. This is also really impactful on your heavy hitters, like if a warlock using a polearm or a barbarian doing anything. Giving them +5 onto their weapon damage can really make them breach some extra thresholds of 2-shotting or even 1-shotting players. Divine Strike is a very powerful spell, especially when you cast it on other people. Lesser Heal, your most common healing spell, very, very useful. Pretty much going to see this on every single cleric build unless they're going full aggression. Heals the target for 15 health. If you cast it on yourself, if you cast it on nobody, it'll hit you instead, healing you for 15. Again, with Advanced Healer, it hits for 20, which is literally 30, or yeah, a third more healing per cast. So massive, massive. Cleanse. I've never found this useful. That doesn't mean it's bad. It's probably the most niche spell of the entire cleric spell list. Removes all harmful effects from the target. Cast on self if no target is found. You get 5 casts of it, and that means you can throw this around a lot. Someone's got a poison, someone's got bleed, someone's got Achilles strike, someone's got literally anything on, cleanse that shit, and they are sitting pretty once again. Again, super niche, very powerful. Let's talk about our 2 easiest to use buff spells that are always very good. If you have 2 spell slots available, you should be using both of these spells. Protection gives you a shield like a regular blue potion. Negates 20 damage, physical damage specifically, over the next 20 seconds. That's it. Very easy. Basically, since you have 5 casts of it, it's essentially 100 extra health if you use it correctly. So very high potential, very easy to use, and more importantly, very easy to use inappropriately because it's so low dedication. Bless, probably one of the best spells in our arsenal, plus 3 strength, agility, and will for 30 seconds. It's a long buff, it's very powerful. Again, remember, strength is max HP and damage, agility is move speed, and will is spell power. If you bless and then cast your other spells, your will's going to be buffed, it's going to be more powerful. You throw that bless on a rogue or your fighter or any of your other, fighting characters in your party, they are insanely more powerful. Bless is a very, very good spell and should be in every cleric's arsenal unless they're going for very specific builds. Very powerful. All right. That was very long-winded. We've talked for about 20 minutes and we've only discussed the perks, skills, and spells of the cleric. I know that was a lot. I hope you took notes. And if I set up chapters on this video, maybe you've already skipped it. Anyway, let's go into our stash. We're going to talk about the cleric's base kit now. I already mentioned that clerics can have the flanged mace, the morning star, and quarterstaff, and the maul. I forgot the maul. But basically, all 4 of our weapons, 2 of which are one-handers, Morningstar and Flanged Mace. I prefer Morningstars, but they're both very good. They have slightly different swing speeds. Slightly different swing arcs. Flanged Maces are entirely vertical swings, very good for headers. Morningstars are a little bit more horizontal swipes instead of purely vertical, but they also have verticals. I like the Morningstar. I think it's a very versatile weapon. But the Flanged Mace is what we start with. We also have the War Maul, which is purely horizontal swings. And then the Quarterstaff, which I do not have any of present, is also two-handed and is mainly verticals, although it also has a horizontal attack. So two one-handers, two-handers. Let's talk about shields. Bucklers is what you start with. It's trash, but hey, it's a shield. It can work. If you have a lot of time in the game and you learn how to block shots correctly, the buckler is more than all that you would ever need. Its stats are pretty middling, debatably worthless, but larger shields like the heater make it a lot easier to block shots. I mean, literally the heater is twice the size, almost, of the buckler. So don't underappreciate the power of a buckler. It's going to really test your ability to block in this game. So if you played a lot of Chivalry or Mordhau or any other similar first-person melee game, that experience in how to block is going to come in really handily to use the buckler effectively. Flanged Mace at gray junk level for base kit is pretty bad. 26 damage is not a whole lot by comparison to other hand weapons that are, focused on dealing a lot of damage in a single hit. We swing slow, but we almost always have verticals in our arsenal. So going for headshots is key. The big thing between a decent cleric and a good cleric is consistently getting headshots. Practice, practice, practice. If you are not hitting PvE targets in the head, you're probably going to have to hit them a lot more than you otherwise would expect. Practice your headers. Wizard Staff is standard fare. It's bad, but hey, it works. I like the spellbook. You cast faster with it. You walk faster with it. It's better in every way. Buy spellbooks. But magic staffs you can strike with, and because the cleric has a lot of melee options available to them, a magic staff in a pinch, throw on a smite for 10 extra damage, and you're actually doing a kind of gross amount of damage in melee with a fucking stick. So don't underappreciate the power of a staff in your hands. No one else is going to swing it better than you as a weapon, but it is still a staff. Try not to. Our frock gives us a lot of base magic resistance. You're going to see this as a theme. Clerics love to be able to resist magic. We are really good at that, which makes us excellent at killing casters. Cloth pants are trash. Sorry, they're bad, but they're here. 2 torches, and we actually get to start with a healing potion, a unique healing potion. This is the junk tier healing potion. This one only heals 12 over 20 seconds, but because of how potion stacking currently works in this game, you can stack junk and then gray and then white tier healing potions for quite the amount of healing. real quick. So this does give us a little bit of extra healing during a run, and we're always going to have at least one of these because it's in our base kit. All right, now let's talk about some builds. I have a little graph that I'd like to show you guys. It's unrefined. I'm not an artist, but here we go. So at the top we have Cleric, right? It's pure and simple. We have Cleric, and then we have Basher and Caster. These are the two main ways to play a Cleric. You're either going to play a Cleric who bashes things and gets in the melee, or you're going to play as a Caster that stands in the back row and does magic shit. Let's talk about Bashers first. There are two main forms of Basher, and I will give you a brief overview on how to build a Basher. You have the Drunk, and you have a Buff Basher. So, let's walk through it. Drunk Basher is pretty flexible. Drunk Basher needs Brewmaster, it needs Smite, and that's pretty much it. You're probably going to want Blunt Weapon Mastery as well. Undead Slaying is an option. But this is the core of the Drunk Basher build. You know, you can end up with something a lot more defensive by rocking Perseverance and Holy Aura. Probably healer, though. You could rock this situation. You could go more utility and grab other things like Requiem if you're in a party. But in my opinion, if you're playing a Basher, you're probably trying to pretend like you can be the front line of your team. So if you're going Drunk, you want Blunt Weapon Mastery, you want Brewmaster, you're probably going to take Undead Slaying for incredible PvE clear. And then this is where shit gets weird. We are going to forego spells as a Cleric with the Drunk. When you are the Drunk, your deal is you're going to get in and you're going to hit people. So this is my personal build for Drunk. Blunt Weapon Mastery, Brewmaster, Protection from Evil, Perseverance, Smite, and Divine Protection. You have foregone Cleric spells for pure melee prowess. You're going to go to your merchants, you're going to go to the Tavern Master. You're going to buy a bunch of booze. You're going to load up at least one full belt. And then you use one of these every time you go into a fight. And your piddly little strength stat is going to go from 11 to 18 with just the bare $1 boozes. And with that coupled with Blunt Weapon Mastery and Smite, you are going to hit obnoxiously hard. Even in your base kit at 26. That's plus 10 for magic. Plus, I mean, let's see. Let's take a look. So strength is at 11. My damage. Yeah, we're going to go from -8 to plus 10% or so with 17 strength. So we're going to go up about 30 total percent damage and all of that. And then we're doing plus 10 magic with our hits. So Drunk, very, very reckless, but that's kind of the idea, I believe. But you do an obnoxious amount of damage. A lot less self-sustained, but you can have items to comfort that. So that's Drunk. Consider it. It's goofy. I've done it. It's very effective. You can win some fights that you have no business otherwise winning. But give it a try. Next, we have the Buff Cleric. Now, what does Buff Cleric mean? There's a couple of ways to take that. We're talking about buffing yourself. So, immediately we're going to put on Spell Memory. We're going to get rid of Brewmaster. And we're probably going to replace it with Holy Aura for pure defensive frontlining. The point of the Buff Cleric is you're going to position yourself in a way that you can stand in the front, hold your ground, and be very difficult to dislodge. So these are your spells. Divine Strike for extra damage, to keep up with the Drunk that you are going to get out damaged by. Bless to meet them, and Protection to outlast them. This frontline Cleric is very good at sustaining themselves. With Sanctuary, they can stand in the back and heal up the party during a fight if you can hold a corner. I've used Sanctuary on corners a lot. It's very good for holding corners. But this build gives you a lot of durability in a fight. These spells are all very fast to cast except for Sanctuary, so you can throw these on yourself mid-battle if you need to. And what's also important is that Weapon Strike, Bless, and Smite all work barehanded. I guess Blunt Weapon Mastery technically also works barehanded. So if you're in a situation where you're chasing someone down with your fists out for max move speed, you're still going to be able to like give them a bap across the back of the head for pretty good damage if you're chasing them down. So that's Buff Cleric. Next, we're going to deviate into the caster region. We have two main approaches to caster, one of which is going to be a healer. So put that away. Healer. How does healer work? Well, let's get into it. We're going to get rid of Holy Aura. We're going to get rid of Blunt Weapon Mastery. We're going to pick up Advanced Healer. We're going to pick up Kindness. And we're going to pick up Requiem. Last perk slot is flexible for whatever you want. Spell memory is required, but honestly, past that point, it's dealer's choice. If you want a little bit more extra durability in a pinch, Divine Protection is going to be useful. Holy Purification is going to be your friend here, but so is Judgment. So either of these is going to be your choice if you want to focus more on PvE. Holy Purification. If you want to be able to have a little bit of range damage in a fight, bring Judgment. But your choice on that one. Now your spells are going to look pretty predictable, I would say. You're going to run Sanctuary, you're going to run Healing Light, and if you can find +2 knowledge somewhere, you're going to run Lesser Heal. I noticed that you brought Requiem, Horatius, but you didn't bring Resurrection. Why is that? Because your job is to heal, not to get people up off the ground. If you want to forego Sanctuary and bring Resurrection instead, your spell list is going to look like this, which is fine, but you're really limiting how much actual healing you're capable of by bringing Resurrection, which is why instead I recommend Sanctuary and then grab from the tailor. Oh, really? We're just not going to have any of the items that I need for this right now? If you go to your stash, something like Mystic Vestments will often have knowledge on it. You really just need +2 knowledge. There's a couple of items that are always going to have knowledge, such as the Radiant Cloak, but that's not something that you can reliably always have available to you. Your rings and jewelry are going to be important, so this build, to really flourish, is going to need 2 extra knowledge. You can get this from a bard, if you have a bard in your party. So there's ways to get it, but it's a little bit difficult to land. But this is a build for team play. So you're not going to really be doing this on your own anywho. Lastly, we have the Blaster Cleric. Blaster Clerics are really cool and they're very diverse, and you never see anybody use them because they're really tricky and very gear dependent. So let's get into it. So, don't need that healing shit. It's worthless. We do need spell memory. We're going to bring Judgment or Healing or Holy Nova, your choice, but probably Judgment. And then we're going to grab defensive perks because we don't need other perks. So you just take your 3 defensive ones, and if you fit a heal spell into your spell list, bring Advanced Healer. If you don't, bring Requiem in case you take someone's soul and put it in a thing. Honestly, the last one's kind of flexible. But to be a blaster, you will take some amount of the following spells: Divine Strike, Bind, and then one of your 2 big boy spells, and Holy Light. These are your 5 spells that you will pick from. Now your list can look something like this, where you grab Bind and Locust Swarm or Earthquake. It can be Divine Strike and Holy Light. I guess you could fit Bind back in there, couldn't you? You could look like this, where you have the Holy Light to kill undead, Holy Strike to hit players, and Bind to hold people accountable, if you get my meaning. But in my opinion, Bind with one of your 2 big spells here are going to give you the best results. Again, this build is highly contingent on you being able to find a bunch of bonus knowledge to increase your spell capacity. And in this build only would I recommend bringing more spells than you ever intend to use. So let's talk about how spell memory works. So you bring Resurrection and Divine Strike, and now you're at cap, right? So you bring these two spells. So if you get +1 knowledge somewhere during the run, Protection is going to become available to be cast. But if you swap that, or if you leave Bless on and then you put Protection afterwards, it's going to unlock in the other order. So you want to make sure that your cheapest spells are the ones that you're putting on your spell list last. Because if you end up like this, same spell list, but you need 2 more knowledge before you can use Divine Strike. Whereas if you do it in the reverse order, you can slowly unlock your cheaper spells that way. So you always want to load your spells up from most expensive to cheapest, and maybe be a little bit self-conscious about the order from that point as well. So those are the 4 classes the 4 subclasses of Cleric that, as far as I can tell, again, to go over them, we have Cleric as the main class, and then you have either offensive or frontline basher or backline caster. Excuse me. And then you have Drunk, which is all offense, no breaks. You bring the Brewmaster, you bring your beer, and then you hit stuff real hard. You might not even bring spells. And then you have the Buff Cleric, who focuses on buffing themselves before they go into a fight without ale. Then you have Caster, which is the healer, and then the Blaster, who focuses on dealing damage with their spells. Very difficult to do as a Cleric. The big thing with Dark and Darker, as with any class in any game, is you're very gear reliant in this game. So some of these builds are not going to work if you don't have the gear for it, plain and simple. So let's talk about what gear options are available to us as Clerics. If we go to the merchants, you can see most of the tailor stuff we can afford. We can bring stuff like Mystic Vestments, old shoes and loose trousers, and the Chaperon for a higher move speed, lower armor. This is all going to influence you to be more of the caster demographic. I could even see, depending upon what bonuses some of these items could have, that something like loose trousers might push you into being a basher, but lighter armored. There's always a trade-off in this game. But rest assured, one of the big things that they've changed recently in one of the recent patches is if you run no to little armor, you're going to take a lot more damage. So make sure that you're armored up to some degree. Leathersmith has a lot of good options for us. Leather Gloves gives plus agility, which helps with our move speed and our attack speed. Leather Cap is available to us. All of the boots pretty much are available except for wizard shoes. Leather legs are nice. We don't have access to Warden outfit or Marauder outfit, but that's fine. We go to the Armorer, though. This is where our Plate Mail is available to us. Plate Mail is going to give you high armor, lower move speed. This is going to be useful if you are okay with getting into a fight and you're stuck in it. A lot of clerics go plate, and I see a lot of people unprepared for being dedicated to a fight that you get put in, because as I mentioned before, move speed is king. If you aren't just bashing with another group to the death, if they decide to disengage at some point, you're not going to be able to chase them if you don't have ranged options. And clerics, we just don't, unless you're playing a dedicated blaster. So, heavy armor is a very big choice. Consider it. It's very useful. You'll take a lot less damage than almost anyone else in the game. And we can outlive a lot of other characters if we're smart. But the fact remains, heavy armor is low move speed, so it's a big choice. I personally find myself with a mix. I'll bring some cloth and some plate. I hardly ever wear plate pants myself, but they are very good. I will almost always wear, you can just tell by my stash, I will always wear a hound skull or one of the cleric plate helmets, such as the Chapelle de Feu or the Kettle Helm. I like plate gauntlets, but my favorite, which is not available right now, is the riveted gauntlets, which have plus strength on them. And then the tailor Love loose trousers from the tailor. Mystic vestments are really nice. And then there's the oracle robes, which are similar to mystic vestments, but instead mystic vestments has +1 will, whereas oracle robes have plus knowledge. If you're going for the caster stuff, buy those oracle robes. Very, very useful for that extra knowledge. So, I've shown you pretty much everything that I know. It's important to build your cleric the way you'll have the most fun with. I think if we go back to my little graph here for the last time, cleric's a very fun class. It's a lot more versatile than I think most people give it credit for. I see a lot of people falling into the cleric equals healer category, and that's fine. But if you're going to play a healer, probably don't wear plate, because healers need to be able to survive. And if you are not going to deal a lot of damage because you're too busy focused on being a caster, you're probably just going to get rolled over in most melees. So stay nimble, stay quick, wear cloth, don't wear plate. If you're a basher, consider going in the medium armor category so you can keep up with your targets, because outside of Bless, you have very little available to you to increase your own move speed. Blasters, wear whatever you want. You're probably going to die if you get rolled up on anyway. Buff bashers, I think, are the most likely candidate in the cleric family to wear a lot of plate, and I highly recommend that they do so. They can be an oppressive frontline force, so be that defensive frontline. If you're drunk, probably wear light armor and go hardcore. Go for headshots. But yeah, that's been my overly long-winded 40-minute long diatribe on how to play a cleric. I'm Horatius the Dwarf, and if you see me in the Goblin Caves, I'm probably looking to heal you, not fight you. Take care, and good luck.